Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a new episode of the Friday Salon. Today, we're gonna explore a game changer of Harvard University.
A man who himself changed the rules with a very influential and impactful thesis. Imagine, like, most theses are forgotten as soon as they're published. Like, the supervisor reads it and then it's done. Into obscurity with the rest of them. But not this one. This is a thesis that more or less sculpted the course of American foreign policy for the next half of a century, and to this day exercises extreme influence considering its timing and when it was situated in history. Who are we looking at today?
We're looking at Dr. Henry Kissinger, one of the most complex, controversial character of the 20th century. I would even say the best, let's call it that way, witness of the 20th century. That's the word.
That's the
witness.
word.
Witness.
That's the word.
We have here that beautiful book, The Meaning of History.
This was his senior thesis at Harvard, and like you said, it was a game-changing thesis.
Why?
Because after he published, like, imagine, you're at Harvard University, the most esteemed institution on the planet,
Yes.
and your thesis alone, as a 24-year-old man,
Yes.
changes the entire rules of the game. After he published this thesis, or after he submitted it, they had to put a page limitation on thesis afterwards.
Exactly.
Like, his thesis changed the rules of the game.
So that book is called The Meaning of History. Well, it was a master's thesis. They turned it out to a book.
Just because it was that influential. And that lasted.
Exactly. It's a history on Kant, Spengler,
and Arnold Toynbee.
So Henry Kissinger here in our last video on Macron, we have started to explore the concept of meaning of history.
Yes.
Giving a meaning to history.
Exactly.
Correct?
Exactly.
And Henry Kissinger understood quite correctly that for a statesman to understand where he is, he needs to know the meaning of history.
Yes.
He needs to, not just to know. So you know history.
Exactly. You know the facts.
You know the
details.
complexities of history.
Yeah.
But then what you see, we've said it in the Macron video. It's like an investment banker looking at the chart.
Yeah, pretty much.
Correct? Now, let's get back to the start. Who was Henry Kissinger?
Henry Kissinger was a German. You can tell from his last name, of course. But as the Nazi regime came in power, his life in Germany became increasingly difficult. He was bullied in the school grounds. His family was persecuted. And so eventually they had to flee to America. To that great land of opportunity.
So he went to America. There was the World War II, right?
Exactly.
World War II. Henry Kissinger went to New York with his family.
Where he was actually studying accounting. He was a student of accounting.
Well, first of all, he used to work like in a factory, he recalls, from a friend's, right? A factory from one of his dad's friends as a student's job, we could say. Then he was an accountant. And the Second World War broke out, right? That was the reason why he immigrated. He went to the intelligence services in the U.S. Army. Correct?
Because he was a proficient German speaker.
Exactly. He was a proficient German speaking, and he decided to go to the U.S. and then to defeat the same regime that forced him
out of his country.
Exactly.
Yes.
And therefore, he became part, and he recalls it. That's the first time I felt like an American.
In the military.
Exactly.
Yes.
Because it's a unifying factor for the whole nation. Correct? In America, it's such a big country. It's not even a country, it's a continent.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's an empire.
It's a civilization.
Exactly.
What makes one man in Maine agree with a man in Los Angeles? It's a national interest.
Exactly, correct. And therefore, Henry Kissinger truly became attached to the United States of America.
Absolutely.
He,
even though, quite interestingly, he never lost his German accent because he was a shy kid.
Reminds me of Arnold Schwarzenegger. Yes, anyways.
Yeah, but Kissinger never lost his accent because he was a shy, reserved kid and spent so much time under the influence of his parents. But nevertheless, he felt truthfully American and truthfully indebted and servant to that American mission.
You know, he's part of that type of people who came from Europe during the Cold War and the two World Wars.
Yes.
Right? Berezhinsky.
I know who you're talking about.
Berezhinsky, the architect of the plan.
Brzezinski,
yes, exactly. And all of those influential political figures that escaped Europe because of persecution, correct?
Later established the post-war America.
And later, they were the spearhead of the United States Cold War, against the Soviet Union.
Exactly.
Why? Because they were well versed in European politics. They understood European politics very deeply in in all its intricacies.
Intimately, on a personal level. These weren't just scholars in the academic sense. These are
Yes.
people with lived experience.
Yes, exactly. Henry Kissinger is the most controversial character, the most complex, and the hardest to
Exactly.
understand of
Exactly.
all. Why?
Yes.
Because it's quite interesting. He was the U.S. advisor to Nixon, but he served only one term.
Yes, I know where you're going. National Security Advisor to Nixon for one term. But that wasn't the end of it for him. It's not like you serve one term and you're done. That's how extreme his influence has been.
Exactly.
So the 60s, of course, he had some immense influence. He won a controversial Nobel Peace Prize for his role in de-escalating the Vietnam War. He's considered up with George Kennan as being the architect of détente and with the containment of the USSR. And so it's a man who more or less sculpted the emergence of America as a hyperpower on the world scene, but he's a man who nevertheless deserves his criticism. A complex man, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
There's a big controversy with the bombing of Cambodia.
Amongst other things, he's a big advocate for American intervention, but it's not because he thinks America has to be a world bully. The answers are in there. And this book elaborates on why America must intervene.
So a quick biography.
Yes.
Let's continue the quick biography. So after the war, he was able to study at Harvard with
Yes.
the GI Bill.
Yes.
That's how they called it at the time. He studied at Harvard. He got his master's degree, then his PhD. Then he became a professor.
Yes.
Correct?
Dr. Kissinger.
Dr. Henry. Correct? So after that, he worked for the Rockefeller family as a private advisor. Correct? For their business endeavors.
Yes. And I think that's where he met Nixon.
That's when, no, it's very interesting because
Rockefeller was a Democrat.
was against Nixon.
Exactly.
You know what happened?
Yeah. Tell the story.
At the time, you can see the elegance of politics. At the
Exactly.
time. You can see the elegance. That's the word, the elegance. Nixon was running against Rockefeller.
Yes.
I don't know which Rockefeller it was.
It was one of them.
Yes, okay, my bad. But it was a Rockefeller, okay, who was running against Nixon. Okay, he lost. The Rockefeller lost. What happened?
Albeit Kissinger was in Rockefeller's campaign.
Exactly.
Yes.
So Nixon,
Notice this Henry Kissinger guy.
yes, he was a technocrat, right?
Yes.
Henry Kissinger. He was a man of talent, not of political
No, like a
ideologies.
pure meritocrat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he was like, you know what? Maybe you should come work for me. And of course, Henry Kissinger contacted Mr. Rockefeller. And then Mr. Rockefeller simply convinced him. He was like, you know what? I'm quoting Henry Kissinger. He's taking a much bigger risk on you than you're taking a risk on him. And that, according to Henry Kissinger, led him to accept the deal. Of course, with the elegance of informing
His past employer.
exactly.
Rockefeller.
And you can see how politics was beautiful at that time. There was
Yes.
no really animosity.
Yes, there wasn't that partisan division of today.
Yes.
You know, Republican, Democrat, whatever, there was this idea of being American.
Yeah.
There was this idea of having an adherence to a civilizational order.
Yes.
And yeah,
We do not agree on everything, right?
whether it's taxes, whatever issue, you know,
Exactly, but we don't need to be...
at each other's throats.
no, like you see what I mean? It was more, I would say, elegant. You can see the debates. You can see the political debates at that time and today, correct? You can see today it's all personal attacks. Back in the days, it was philosophical
Yes.
contests between two gentlemen.
Albeit simplified and articulate philosophical contests.
Exactly. So Henry Kissinger went and worked for Nixon.
As the National Security Advisor.
Okay, and why is he so important, man? At the time, what was happening?
Well, Cold War, post-war period.
Yeah.
He negotiates the peace in Vietnam.
What was the big risk? The big risk that could have happened during that time, the Cold War?
Nuclear Armageddon.
Yeah, like the end of the
Nuclear
world.
Armageddon.
Just the end of the world.
Yes.
And, like you need to understand the stress on Henry Kissinger was the end of the
Unlike
world.
anything else, it was literally the end of the world.
The
We're talking about
apocalypse.
the ultimatum.
Yeah.
The ultimatum.
Voilà, the apocalypse. So
Yeah.
you need to understand that man was really a big stress tolerant.
Oh, you have to be.
Correct? And therefore, afterwards, Henry Kissinger worked as the national advisor, and after that, he was the one, we could say, who architected the fall of the Soviet Union. How? By opening to China.
Exactly.
He opened to China. How did he open to China? Because he had a deep understanding of Chinese history. Chinese history, as he talks about it and tells about it, is on a thousands and thousands of years scale.
Yeah.
Nice.
The scope of analysis for Chinese history is much grander than that of Western history. In the West, we think our canon begins with the Iliad, right? Like the Western canon begins with Menin, Aede, Thea, Peliadio, Achilleos, right? But for the Chinese, the Iliad was like yesterday.
Yes. Exactly. So you need to understand, please understand, for us, the Greeks, okay? For the Greeks, the ancient Greeks, the pyramids are what the Greeks are themselves for us. They are so ancient. Now, for the Chinese, they were there when the pyramids were built. They remember. You see what I mean? Henry Kissinger explains it. He says that he was discussing with the Chinese, with Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong at the time. He used to call him a very effective man. Well, effective man meaning he could wipe out 1 million people like that, right?
With no consequences.
Yeah, exactly. So Mao Zedong used to explain to him that, they used to have a conflict with India. Just to give you a certain context of how the Chinese used to think, and still do. And then Mao Zedong looked at Henry Kissinger. He was like, you know what? 2,500 years ago, I remember we had the same conflict at the border with India, and we solved it like that. And Henry Kissinger looked at him. He was like, oh, I'm talking to a man
whose memory goes back 2,500 years.
What did Nietzsche say?
The future belongs to whoever has the longest memory.
Simple.
And so Mao Zedong proved that his memory was the longest of the people there. And a lot of this has to do with the vision and the outlook that these different civilizations have on history, which we can touch on later, but after we finalize this Kissinger story, this Kissinger biography.
Okay. So Henry Kissinger simply dismantled the Soviet Union by opening up to China.
And consider, without a single American or Russian engaging in direct combat with each other.
Exactly.
He defeated an empire without a single moment of direct engagement.
Exactly. With George Kennan, of course, what was one of the main character of that deal, right?
Yes.
George Kennan architected the Cold
containment,
War,
yes.
the containment policy, exactly, to encircle. You see?
Yeah.
So, I'll tell you what, and Henry Kissinger discusses that. Europeans play chess.
Yes.
But Chinese people
have their chess is even more advanced.
No, they have a type of chess called...
yes, I know what you're talking about.
I forgot how it's called. It's Les Dames. I forgot how it's called.
Something,
But the goal is not to attack the enemy face to face.
Exactly. It's to encircle them. Yes.
So that's literally the policy they've applied. Right now we're talking to you about strategy. Okay, it's strategy.
We're even talking to you about, let's say, Geist a little bit, spirit. Look at the difference between the American or between the Western strategy game and the Chinese strategy game.
Please, exactly. Yeah. The American strategy game is based on European strategy game. Right?
Which is confrontation.
Chess. Confrontation.
Which is tactical superiority.
But nowadays, you cannot confront the enemy face to face when both of you have
nuclear
weapons.
arms. Forget about it.
You need to tell him, listen, man, if you start a war, we're done. But you need to use other actors. Correct? And therefore, you need to have a war indirectly. Correct? Well, whatever. Let's not get into the complexities of that strategic endeavor. And anyways, Kissinger opened to China. He opened up to China. And how did he open up to China? Because he understood China. He understood China deeply.
Yes.
And of course, the secret of diplomatic skills is to be able to put yourself in the shoes of the other, as we say vulgarly. All right?
Yeah.
Now, that's just an introduction to Kissinger. And for his whole life, he was the advisor of every single president until his death.
Yeah, pretty much. Even though he never held a formal role, he was nevertheless advisor, extremely consequential, until the moment of his death.
Exactly.
Until the moment of his death, his opinion was still sought after.
And of course, the big corporations, of course. Everybody, all the big business moguls used to ask his...
He had a private consultancy firm, Kissinger & Associates.
Exactly. He used to be invited, it was a habit for him to go to Davos, right? To give speeches at the World Economic Forum. He was at home there. Please understand that. And of course, the Nixon Foundation used to invite him all the time, of course. And voila. So please understand, on that channel, we will try to explore every single book of Henry Kissinger. Because we think he is the most important witness, that's the word, witness, and even actor.
Architect.
Even actor of the Cold War.
Yeah.
And of the 20th century. Kissinger was the witness of the most important leaders. And he discusses that in his book.
Leadership, yes.
We will
discuss
about
Lee Kuan Yew, Charles de Gaulle, all of them. It's
but
immense.
today we will explore the basis of his way of thinking.
Like the Genesis.
Yes.
The young man Kissinger.
Please,
We're looking at
because
Kissinger, the young man.
when you want to explore a character, you need to go to the basics. That's the basics. Those are the foundations. The meaning
Turn it
of
to them
his...
so they can see the thickness of the book as well.
Yes, of course. That's a magnificent book. It's a beautiful book.
A 24-year-old wrote
Thesis.
this. A 24-year-old wrote this.
Yes, okay. So that's the most complex book, I think, one of the most complex book I personally ever read.
Yeah.
I'll tell you honestly, I've read all of it word for word and yourself to correct. And from my experience, it's the most complex, one of the top 3 most complex
And
books
not even
I've ever
complex,
read.
profound in its scope and
Yes.
broad in its analysis.
But you could just understand, like, the man was 24 years old. I'm 24 years old, correct? Like, his mind was so deep at that time. Very interesting.
Yes.
Anyways, so the meaning of history is a reflection on Spengler, Toynbee, and Kant. 3 big philosophers who have decided to think on the meaning that history can give us.
Exactly. And so it's an interesting thing. That's like the first thing that stands out about this book is its title, The Meaning of History. It's as if you were making an assumption that history even has a meaning. That all of these events which occur throughout the span of time are not just aimlessly and illeatorily floating around throughout the vacuum of time. Rather, these events have some type of meaning. And we explored this a little bit with the Macron video discussing Hegel.
Exactly.
History is something rational. History is something...
It has a goal.
Empirical. It has a telos, right? But Kissinger contests this a little bit as he looks at his 3 big inspirations, Kant, Toynbee, and Spengler.
I see. Therefore, what we know about that is that Henry Kissinger used to try to decipher the meaning of history for a reason. What was the reason? The reason was to give meaning to the actions of the leader. Henry Kissinger, while Nixon was in office, offered him a book.
Yes.
We discussed that before. Even.
Yes.
It was...
The name is on the cover there, Spengler.
It was Oswald Spengler's Decline of the West. Well, the title might seem a bit pessimistic, but the book is not. The book is not.
Exactly.
It's not, oh, we're done, we're going to die. No. It's, please, you need to understand, there's a cycle. We are here in that cycle.
And here's how we can manage it.
And Henry Kissinger, in his interviews that you can find today on YouTube, discussed how he thought it was important. Please understand, the most powerful and we could say effective man on the world, the United States president, was given a 2-volume book of Oswald Spengler. That's a 1,000 pages book.
Yeah, pretty much.
So Henry Kissinger was like, listen, I know you're busy.
I know the world's about to end. I know there's nuclear bombs.
Yeah, but
and
please
I know
take the time to read that book. So we could tell you it's a very important book because as Henry Kissinger says it, you need to understand where you are in the cycle of history. It's cyclical.
And to know where you are going, look from where you come.
Exactly. So let us explore the different views of Spengler,
Toynbee,
and Kant.
Yes.
Yes.
And I think we have to begin with Kant.
Please go
I
ahead.
think we have to begin with Kant because Kant is really the guy that launches this tradition of historical speculation of universal history, which is a tradition of thought, of philosophy that has to do with kind of trying to ascribe some type of meaning to history. And without going deeply into Kant, because you could lose your mind with Kant, the main pieces with Kant are the universal history with a cosmopolitan purpose, what is enlightenment, and contest of faculties. Pretty much what Kant says is man is the basic motivator of history. Man, the individual. But the individual as a unit within his immediate social group. He kind of takes after Rousseau. Because how does Rousseau begin his analysis in the social contract? With the state of nature, correct?
Correct.
And so Kant evolves humanity out of the state of nature. He says what motivates man is this idea of perfectibility. A man is driven to perfect himself because of logic, because of reason, and because of the fact, this is Kant's take, we don't necessarily agree, but because man has very basic and limited equipment, we don't have fangs like the tiger, we don't have claws like the bear. So what did we do? We developed nuclear weapons to make up for it. Exactly. So man,
it's of course the discovery of fire, of promoting fire.
The Prometheus taking the flame.
Right? The technique.
Exactly.
Man develops the technique.
Technology. Man acquires technology.
And it's even Hobbes, when Hobbes discusses that man in the state of nature has approximately the same power of other, but like he needs to have a social group and whatever,
Exactly.
Right? But the thing is here, what we need to explore is that you need to understand that their view of history is not centralized, right?
Centralized meaning?
Centralized meaning. Like you have nowadays, right? You have an African view of history. you have a Eurocentric view of history. You have the history according to the Chinese.
Oh yeah, even in, let's say, Canada, for example, the Quebecois guy and the Ontario guy have different history textbooks.
They have different...
Within one country.
Yeah, but we're talking to you about a universal history.
Exactly. Like, this is a history that applies everywhere at any time. Or so thought Kant.
Exactly.
Or so thought Kant.
Exactly.
And so what happens eventually in Kant's thesis is, man has to develop states because it's only in states that man can develop. States go to war. And eventually man develops philosophy. States become democratic. Democracies don't go to war with each other, and therefore world peace is achieved. Nice. That's the conclusion of Kant. And what Kant establishes more or less is this idea of progress. This idea that...
Linear.
Exactly. Kant's view of history is linear. Kant's view of history is linear. It begins with man in a basic setting. It ends with world peace and global democracy, democratic proliferation. And as we ascend up the scale of history, we become more democratic, more liberal, more free, more knowledgeable. Okay. That's Kant's story.
So on the long term, like, there might be ups and downs, right? But on the long term, it's always going up. That's how Kant views it.
Exactly.
Correct?
And this is the basis of the Western idea of progress.
Yes.
This idea of the unbounded future, that with logic and reason, man can invent and expand beyond his basic animal equipment.
The expansion to infinity.
Yeah, literally.
That's what he calls it. You know how he calls it? He calls it I'll tell you what. I'll tell you. It has a specific name. The Faustian soul.
The Faustian spirit. The Faustian spirit, yes.
The Faustian soul. That's how it's called. That will to go towards eternity.
Yes.
Okay? The Faustian spirit. That's how Kissinger calls it. And the Faustian spirit has had a big influence on Europe, and that's how they've expanded to the United States. Because the will to...
It's the origin point of the manifest destiny.
Exactly. Thank you very much. You understand. So what I mean by that is that the Faustian spirit is pretty much the Germanic spirit will of expansion with no limitations. With no limitations.
The unbounded future.
We could say
the will towards infinity.
We could say that's the spirit that gave rise to the Western expansion.
Yes.
Right?
That's the spirit which gives rise to the idea of progress, of a linear history.
Exactly, because Western expansion had no proper goal, right? People were just going west, right, on horses with no really defined goal, correct? And that's the Faustian spirit, okay? That's what...
And you might say, like, they went for money, but even money is a result of the Faustian spirit.
Thank you.
Like, it all has an origin. It's not like one caused the other.
When we say a spirit, we mean it's something that acts within people in their subconscious.
Whether they know it or not.
Yeah, exactly.
And most times they don't know it.
Yeah, like completely. And what was written on the Temple of Delphi?
The Oracle of Delphi.
The Delphic Temple, yeah. When you entered, there was something written on the wall. What was it?
Know thyself.
Know thyself. You need to know yourself, what moves you, the spirit that moves you, okay? What did Auguste Comte say?
Les morts gouvernent les vivants.
Exactly. The dead govern the living. Okay, you act a certain way because you've acted like that in past lives.
Absolutely.
When we say past lives, we mean your ancestors, right? You are the result of their virtues and sins, correct?
Oh, completely.
Therefore.
Let's finalize the point about Kant and get on to Toynbee.
I agree with you.
Yeah, so Kant more or less outlines and puts to pen and paper the Western concept of linear progress, which, let's say, it has its basis in the Renaissance, and therefore in humanism and philosophication. It's very empirical. So here's a summary of Kant. Man's perfectibility is the motivation of history. He develops states to perfect himself. States go to war. Progress means the world is becoming more peaceful, democratic, and liberal. That's the end of history for Kant.
Okay, perfect. Now let's go to Spengler.
Sure, why not? Let's do it.
Oswald Spengler. Oswald Spengler was a quite controversial character, honestly.
Yes.
He has a bad reputation, let's be honest.
Yes, I mean, he was very popular as a private intellectual,
yes.
But he was kind of rejected by the academic sphere, and even today he's known, like the name is known, Oswald Spengler, but he's not studied formally in schools.
He has a bad reputation for a simple fact. The title of his book.
It's very pessimistic.
The Decline of the West. Nobody wants to talk of decline. Oh, you're a declinist. Oh, we need optimists here, please. Okay, but honestly, when you read the book, like it's a big book, please understand this. It's 1,000...
No, it's 1,000 pages and the text is very small.
Okay, we've read the whole book, okay, word for word. We can tell you something. When you read it, you're like, that guy actually isn't just telling us that we're all going to die. No, He's telling us that, listen, guys, there's a cycle. Please understand you're in that part of the cycle. Act accordingly. That's what it is.
Yes.
Now, of course, the three of them, right? Those three
These
philosophers.
historical speculators.
Why
yes.
did they write? Like, what was happening
You know
in
what?
Europe?
A lot of it was motivated. Like, when we think of the 20th century and that bloodshed in the 20th century, we turn our gaze to the Second World War.
Even René Guénon.
Yeah. There you go. Like, we always turn our gaze towards the 20th century, towards the Second World War. But in fact, it's the First World War that had the most civilizational
You know why?
consequence.
Because today, you know what happens? We separate the First and the Second World War.
Exactly.
But people at the time understood there was just a continuation. The Second World War, at the time, even Charles de Gaulle used to say, like, we know it's coming. Everybody knew it was coming.
Yeah.
Okay?
And the interwar period was just Germany rearming.
Yeah, please understand, because like the occupation of the French army of the Rhineland and like that oppression that was put on Germany.
Engendered by the Treaty of Versailles.
Yeah, of course, right? Like it was not acceptable. Of course, we're not justifying war, right? We're trying to understand. Like what we need.
Motivates states and actors and states.
like please, like the Treaty of Versailles was a complete humiliation for Germany. That was a proud nation, a Prussian nation, a Prussian military.
Yeah.
And that gave rise to populist ideologies that
sent the world
sent
to a
Europe
dark
to
place.
complete bloodshed, destruction, and by that the world, right?
Yeah.
So, anyways,
So the First World War is really the origin point for Spengler and Toynbee.
Yes.
Witnessing that calamity that dissolves the concert of Europe. Because imagine, Hegel, you know what the end of history was for Hegel? It was the Napoleonic Wars.
Exactly.
When Wellesley defeated Napoleon at Waterloo, Hegel said, history is over, the dialectic is resolved.
Exactly.
Concert of Vienna, Europe of nations, done. What the First World War did is it dissolved the Europe of nations.
Oh, exactly.
It dissolved the Europe of nations.
The Westphalian Europe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It dissolved the concert of Europe, and it brought about,
No more empires.
yes, no more empires. It was
Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman.
the death of empire.
Exactly. And therefore, something quite interesting happened. It was that all of those thinkers were like, oh my God, like we're seeing empires fall and rise.
Yeah.
New nations come in. Like, where are we? Like, so those people have decided to study other empires, to treat them as individuals.
Yeah.
Like an individual, right? An individual. He's born. Okay.
He has
grows
his
up,
adolescence, his puberty,
and he
he
dies.
matures. He maybe reproduces, has some offspring.
Thank you. So those people have studied empires like individuals.
Yeah.
Okay. So they've understood that there are certain honesty, and you can see the complete. You can understand the adequacy of that, because by that, empires are treated as individuals. Okay, they have a lifespan. Therefore, Spengler was telling us that civilizations have certain behaviors.
Yes.
First of all, he takes the example of the Greeks.
Let's do it.
The Greeks developed their inner culture within themselves. The Athenians, the Spartans fighting each other.
Yeah, they were isolated.
Then he explains to us that nations are built because they need to find a response to a problem. The Greeks only actually became a proper
Nation.
unified
Yeah.
culture.
Or culture. Yeah,
When?
nationhood is a later thing. But
When?
with the Greco-Persian Wars.
Thank you very much. So those were people who used to fight each other, who were faced, okay.
With a larger enemy to the east.
So simply, they've adapted, okay. They've adapted, they've unified against it, and then that's when Spengler explains to us the age of empire,
Yeah, and let's consider what
of
does
civilization. Sorry.
yes, what does war do? It's not just they unified and went to war with Persia and won.
Yeah.
Like there was a big influence in the mind and in the spirit of the Greeks when this happened, because in order to fight the Persians, you needed to make a navy.
Yes.
Right? There was the whole League of Delos, and it gives rise to the supremacy of the Athenian Empire. But in order to have a navy, you need rowers. And so by bringing more rowers into your... Yeah.
Thank you. So you democratize war.
Yeah.
That's on the sea.
Exactly.
Yes. And on the land,
The phalanx.
you have the phalanx.
Exactly.
So before, you've had only a class of aristocrats who
yeah.
were the fighters, but now you need everyone.
You need the entire
You need
nation.
everyone.
You need the entire spirit of your nation to win these wars nowadays.
So when war is democratized, the political system is democratized, because the man
Yeah.
who goes to war, okay, even though he's a peasant,
He nevertheless has a stake in his nation.
He understands that he's the guy who fought for that. Okay, he's the guy who saw his friends die for that. So he wants to have his say, his word.
Yeah.
Correct?
Absolutely.
Therefore, there was a democratization on the land and on the sea by rowers, by the phalanx formations. Therefore, you have a unified Greece. So Spengler explains us very nicely that empires have lifespans. Right?
Yes, like individuals.
First of all, they have cultures, and the culture becomes a civilization. And for him, a civilization is kind of, it's the German word, the German meaning of civilization is kind of a bad word. It's not like a compliment, okay?
Okay.
Which means, the Greco-Persian War led to what?
The unification of Greece.
Why? Because the unification was the consequence of a problem, correct?
Of a vast Eastern enemy.
Exactly. It was the consequence of a problem, correct?
Correct.
Yes. So, who unified Greece, like, officially?
Philip of Macedon.
Right.
Yes.
Philip of Macedon, right, unified those cultures
Yes.
into one.
Spartan, Corinthian, Athenian, whatever.
Thank you. Then there was a man who famously said, who expanded the culture into an empire to the east, correct? And famously said, my father found you as simple and mere peasants who couldn't even protect their sheep and cattle. Under him you lived in cities, you had ports, you had commerce. Your former enemies are now your subjects. Me, for my part, I have made you satraps, generals, kings. Some of your children will marry some of mine. All of those who died have had statues, glory, immortal pride to their original cities. And today that you have made it to Susa, you want to abandon me? Go! Go back to your homes. You might be worthy in the eyes of men and the gods. So that was the expansion of the empire by whom?
By Alexander. And that speech was the Opus Mutiny.
Yes, thank you.
What is...
Yes.
That's up there.
So there was a mutiny against Alexander while he was expanding the culture.
Yes.
So what is the empire? The empire is the expansion
of the culture.
Of the culture. It's like, you know what? It's like you're an introvert. You make up your mind. You
establish yourself.
Yeah, and then what do you do with those ideologies, with that philosophy?
Those sentiments, those experiences,
what do you do?
Those beliefs, those convictions. You expand yourself outward.
So you become an
in
extrovert.
your career, in your social life.
Exactly. So that was the meaning of Spengler. Like for Spengler, the civilization is, you can say, the extrovert
of the culture, the extroversion of the culture.
Exactly. For example, the British Empire, right? The British Empire. We have seen its rise and decline, right? The British Empire established itself within Great Britain.
Yes.
But then it expanded, correct?
Across the seas.
Yeah, the expansion was an expansion of its culture. But the culture...
Of its institutions.
Exactly, thank you. But the expansion of the culture cannot subsist within the empire. So that's what he means. The civilization is when the culture becomes an empire. That's what he means by civilization, okay?
Yes.
Therefore, Spengler explains to us, like for example, the Romans, that we're going to see that with Toynbee, by the way.
Yes.
Toynbee explains to us, for example, right? Let's connect them together, okay?
For sure.
Toynbee, for example, tells us that the Roman Empire, right? Like, nobody knew that the Roman Empire was falling. Exactly. When you ask a Roman...
No, Toynbee, you know what Toynbee's hit banger is? What his hit line is?
Tell me.
Civilizations die by suicide, not by murder.
Yes, completely.
That's Toynbee's if there's one thing you remember from Toynbee, civilizations die by suicide.
Why?
Not by murder.
Why?
Essentially, it comes down to class division. It comes down to a disagreement between a creative minority and a vast,
thank you very much,
angry proletariat.
So you have, in every type of culture and civilization, you have a creative minority.
An elite, an aristocracy, whatever you want to call it.
No, but like, we need to understand what we mean by elite and aristocracy. We're not talking of people who have money or privileges of land. No. We're talking about people who can create.
That's what we mean.
They can create, okay? So, that small minority can create because they are trying to respond, to answer to a problem.
Yes, this is the mechanism. We're going somewhere.
Thank you.
This is for Toynbee, this is the mechanism that develops a civilization. It's called challenge and response.
Exactly.
Challenge and response.
Exactly. So when that creative minority
has faced with the challenge,
what do they do?
They use their creativity to make a response.
And what do the mass of the people do?
Follow along.
They emulate them.
Yes.
Okay, because they admire them. They don't worship them, right?
They're not gods,
right? You could say it's like influencers today.
But there's a reciprocal relationship, right? How is it? The Lord comes over to your land and says, listen, I'm annexing your land.
Yeah.
Pay me a tribute. I will defend your land against invaders. And when I go to war, you must join me.
Yeah.
There's a reciprocal relationship between the aristocrat and his serf.
But that minority was a creative minority. When the whole polis, the whole political entity was faced by a problem, that creative minority was able to find solutions.
Yeah.
That's what we mean by aristocracy.
Yeah.
Now, something happens, and Toynbee says that, suicide. What does he mean by that? When the creative minority doesn't create anymore, what happens?
They become decadent. The problems go unsolved.
And they become what he calls a dominant minority.
Yes. But...
You know, in Arabic, they say, there's a saying in Arabic, كن عصاميا لا عصاميا. Very nice saying. It means be someone who sees himself, who is proud of his own work and not on the laurels of his forefathers. And that is what the dominant minority is. It's a minority that doesn't create anymore, right? And they only rule because their ancestors were creative.
And they're just inheriting the privileges of the past.
That becomes tyranny.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what it devolves into.
Okay.
It devolves into tyranny.
Exactly.
Yep.
So if the creative...
Or no, what it devolves into is class violence.
Yes.
What it devolves into is class violence. What it devolves into is proletariat resentment.
Yeah.
And ultimately, civil war and tyranny.
Yes. And what do you have at the border? Listen, please, you need to understand that's super important.
Yeah.
At the border...
You have barbarians.
You have what he calls hordes. Mm-hmm. A horde is a mass of people, okay, who themselves cannot... Listen, when the creative minority doesn't create anymore, they become the dominant minority. They rule because their forefathers used to create.
They rule just for the sake of ruling.
Then people are like, listen, you're not finding any solutions to our problems. We're not going to emulate you anymore. We don't respect you anymore. Ciao. They become hordes. Yeah. Then they come to the fringe of other empires.
Yeah.
They see those decadent empires. What do we mean by decadent? We mean the minority is decadent. The minority has no moral rules, no moral aspects. The minority doesn't create anymore.
Minority abandoned its responsibilities.
So the lower classes do not emulate them. They do not respect them
Exactly.
anymore. Correct?
Yeah.
Who comes in?
The barbarians.
And what does the barbarian know?
The forgotten knowledge.
Thank you very much. The barbarian knows...
Just to say the creative power that the aristocrats lost, that the minority lost, the barbarian retained it because because, you know, when a state establishes itself too much, that mechanism of challenge and response disappears.
Yes.
And without challenges, there's no more response.
Exactly.
Toynbee says there must be a delicate balance in the difficulty of the challenge.
And density builds density.
You know, like the Eskimos could not develop because their challenges were too intense.
Yes.
Because every resource they had to be devoted towards the basic and pressing needs of survival, right? But without any other challenges...
But people who lived in tropical countries...
Yes.
Right?
Where it was so bountiful, they stayed in the state of nature forever.
No, but wait, they didn't have too many challenges.
Exactly. So they stayed in paradise forever. They stayed in the state of nature forever.
Yes.
They never went up the scales as Kant would have outlined it.
Yes.
They never progressed. They never had that... what did you call it? The Faustian spirit, the expansion towards infinity. That never occurred to them. Infinity was already before them.
Not because they were inferior. No, because they didn't have challenges.
Exactly.
That's all. And it's great, honestly, right? Everybody likes that, right? To have everything easily, right? Now, it's like you said exactly. The barbarians at the border
are more in touch with the challenge and response mechanism. They're more vigorous, less decadent.
What do they become in the Roman Empire? The federati. The federati. Right? At the end, the aristocracy wasn't a warlike aristocracy, right?
Yes.
And they used to employ the federati, a bunch of barbarians from the north. And please understand, when we say barbarians, it's not like a demeaning term.
We don't mean a savage.
No, we don't exactly. We don't mean a savage. We mean someone who wasn't part of the empire before, and who has, by the way, who has more vigor.
Yeah.
Okay? He has more vigor. So the barbarian comes and cleanses. We could say the lack the lack of energy
Yep.
of the aristocracy. Odoacre. I don't know in English how you say it. Odoacre was a barbarian king who took Italy and then was crowned by the Byzantine Empire as his legate to rule. He was a barbarian king, right? And anyways, so Toynbee, Kant, and Spengler see, for example, the Roman Empire, you take it.
Yeah.
In Spain, for example, the Visigoth,
Yeah.
right, came there, and the local Roman population, who used to speak Latin at the time, saw it as a renewal of the empire. Like,
Yes.
But Rome, at the time, the capital was in Ravenna. You had Romulus Augustus in Ravenna, who was dethroned by Alderic, who was a barbarian.
Alderic, yes.
Yes, okay. So, but in the other parts of the empire, everybody thought the empire was well.
Yes.
You see what I mean?
Yes.
So you do not feel the decline.
Like the organism becomes too large
Exactly.
to feel the decline.
Exactly. So, why are we talking to you about Rome, right? Like some of you might be like, yeah, but man, Rome is so outdated. Like, yeah, it is. Rome was such in a long time ago. Yes, it's true. But there are some principles we can understand from that.
And that's the whole object of speculative history.
Yes.
Which is like, these principles are applicable anytime, any place, anywhere.
Yes.
Like that's it. These are universal principles of history.
Yes.
That's what we're going at here. It's true regardless of where you are.
Exactly, completely. And therefore we can decipher from that some principles, as Nikita just said, are omnipotent and omnipresent.
Yep.
Like it doesn't matter what time you're in, what space you're in, they're always true. So those three philosophers who formed the basis of Henry Kissinger's
Thinking.
soul. And again, we will explore each and every single one of Henry Kissinger's books until his last one, which is The Age of AI. Okay? So it's very important for you to understand how he thought, as history being a cycle. He even thought like Macron.
Yeah.
We invite you to watch our Macron video. And that's what it is.
But ultimately, you said Kissinger views history as being a cycle. I see Kissinger mostly having that, being Germanic man himself, having that Faustian spirit, as being more in line with Kant. Being more in line with Kant, because ultimately what Kant gets to is a universal state. That's the end goal of history for Kant. It's a universal state. And you can see how this emerges in the 20th century with things like United Nations.
I'll tell you something more than that.
Okay.
I'll tell you something more than that. You're completely correct. But Kant thinks that, yeah?
Yeah.
But for Toynbee, the universal state is a response to a challenge. When you cannot hold your borders, right? What do? You're like, okay. Like the Roman Empire became Christian when?
When the barbarians began to invade.
The barbarians began to invade. They relied on federatis.
Yes.
Okay. Therefore, they were like, you know what? Love is love.
Christianity it is.
No, really.
Yes.
It's true. It's not a good or a bad thing. We're not doing morality. We're not telling you it's good or bad. We're just trying to understand. And it's true, right? And they became Christian. They had the universal church. The universal church sees no, like it's a spiritual bondage. It's a spiritual fealty.
Fidelity, yes.
Right?
Yes.
Loyalty.
Yes.
So you are not bound by the laws of kin and blood.
Yes.
It's done.
But
the spirit now.
But Toynbee has a bit of a dispute with this, which is that it makes people more cosmopolitan.
Yes.
The patrician, the Roman patrician, no longer views himself as being a Roman.
But just a patrician.
Just being a patrician, being a landowner.
So he is closer, think of it. He's closer
to abstraction than to his own land.
No, he is closer to another patrician from another country.
Exactly.
It's like today, no? You can see it.
It's globalization.
Think of it. The guy who lives in New York
is more in common with the guy that lives in, let's say, Shanghai. Or not quite Shanghai.
No, like in a big megalopole.
Yes.
In Paris.
The guy in New York has more in common with the guy in Paris than the guy in New York does have with the guy in upstate New York.
No, they have the same culture.
Yeah.
The same aspirations.
Yep.
Correct?
Yep.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Like the guy in London is closest to the guy in New York than the guy in Kent.
Yes.
You see what I mean?
And Toynbee discusses this. Yeah. He says, people embrace this cosmopolitanism when consumerism reigns rampant.
Yes.
People's fidelity and higher loyalties devolve from the level of the civilization to the level of the individual. This is a Guénon reference.
Yes.
And towards materialism and consumerism.
So before, the youth used to want to go towards courage, towards honor,
Yeah.
towards bravery, towards military prowess.
Towards vigor, towards achievement,
But the youth
Nowadays.
after that wants to go
towards followers and likes.
after money.
Yeah.
And to go after money, they go after, that's what Toynbee calls, refers to it as being the youth going after education.
Yes.
Before, look,
yes,
think
yes,
of
yes.
it. Before Harvard was sustaining all the intelligentsia of the U.S. Now you have university everywhere. You even have universities online now.
Yeah.
So
You even have the Friday Salon.
yeah, it's like the Friday Salon is, we could say, the answer to a problem. The Friday Salon,
Challenge and response.
exactly. The Friday Salon is a culture that grew and matured, and that is now becoming a civilization through you, ladies and gentlemen. By the way, have I told you? Like, subscribe, share. Like, subscribe, share.
Comment.
That's how you support
We love reading
us.
we love reading your comments, by the way. Those always make our day when we see those.
Completely, by the way. We know each and every single one of you. We love you. We miss you. And would like you to listen to us more often, because it's not our thoughts. It's just the thoughts of dead and smart men, very smart men. And by the way, if you've been enjoying that video, you could simply support us by liking, subscribing, costs us nothing. And plus, it's a great reward for the hard work, dedication, and consistency we've been presenting you. Therefore, a like, a subscription, a share, and of course, we have links to our pages where you can fund us financially. That, of course, would not affect our neutrality, our will to present you academic work that is above the cleavages of politics we see nowadays. Thank you very much for your support. Anything could help, a like, and onward and forward, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, let's wrap it up.
Let's bring it to a conclusion.
Yes,
Let's bring it to a conclusion.
completely.
Toynbee, Spengler, they all talk about, world is ending, but don't be concerned.
No,
Don't be concerned.
no, we're here.
The salon is here.
Yes.
The skilled statesman, the one with the longest memory, knows how to steer the ship of the state on its most calamitous waters. When the barbarians are at the borders, he knows how to respond.
Yes.
He knows how to unify.
Tell them.
He knows how to command and instruct.
Okay.
And these are some of the lessons we can draw from this book. And if you want to know where you're going, you must know where you come from.
Please.
If history has a meaning, it's because we have given it to history. And if we have meaning, it's because history has given it unto us. There is no man who can bear the burdens of the world on his own.
No.
And each man exists, lives, carries out his life as a direct and immediate consequence, shareholder, burden carrier, cross carrier of all the virtues and sins of each and every man which came before him. He stands in the shade of that tree planted so many generations ago, whose original planters were unable to enjoy that shade. And likewise, he too must plant trees whose shade he shall not sit in. And those are the virtues of studying history.
And by that and through that, we're telling you that was the basic understanding of Henry Kissinger.
Basic.
One of the most complex, intricate, and controversial minds of
By
history.
far.
And therefore, that was the Friday Salon, always here for you. Ladies and gentlemen, for you, nothing is too complex and precious. For us, we're here to serve. Why? Because your pleasure.
It is our treasure.
Voilà.
Voilà qui je suis, mais voilà même ici, mes années c'est fini, c'est